Sorry about that one, everybody, but we're here on the MLB Deeper Dive. Dave Loughran, and a man who doesn't know how to read a schedule, Adam Ship My Money Share. I'm just busting your balls, but we were supposed to start at 4:40. A couple things got lost in translation, but you're here now, and we got 7 games to cover. At least we don't have 9 because everyone has the coronavirus.
Yeah. I mean, it works out. We were probably going to waste like 10 minutes on those games anyway.
So thanks for being patient, everyone. Glad to have all of you with us. We will. Here's what I've decided is best to do. So we'll go till 5:50, and then we'll bring in Alex and Chris Spags from 5:50 to 6:40 because we've got a 6:40 lock time today. You're going to see DraftKings and FanDuel do some weird stuff, I think, where they start them differently. For example, Adam, we've got Toronto and Washington at 6:05. That's on the main FanDuel slate today. So I'd say we just jump into that one real quick. Put it this way. People watching live before lock aren't going to have the same amount of time at all, but they'll have the same amount of time to put lineups in watching the deeper dive. So just to jump into this quickly, I don't want to waste any time. Anibal Sanchez and Trent Thornton are your go-to guys here on the bump for Toronto and Washington. Just a quick take on this game now. Is there anybody, as far as pitching goes, because it's a very ugly pitching slate, there's no doubt it is from top to bottom ugly, and DraftKings specifically has priced a lot of pitchers through the roof, unjustifiably so, but that's what's been done. Go ahead.
So I kind of like what DraftKings did with pricing up the guys. FanDuel did the exact opposite, which is
I'd rather DraftKings do that than FanDuel do this. I don't disagree with that.
Right. Which, like, if FanDuel had done what DraftKings did, you could have like a conversation about Trent Thornton and everything. Josh James is $6,700. There's no point.
Yep. Yeah. And not only him, we'll get to him momentarily, but it's not like, okay, for example, Dylan Cease, I know a lot of people are concerned about him. Kid's got filthy stuff. He's $6,300 on FanDuel.
Right. I think you're on the same page as me. You're not saying that you would rather roster Cease than James, but if you're looking for a pivot, Dylan Cease is better than Trent Thornton.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Meaning that James isn't the only one that is mispriced on FanDuel.
Right.
I think a great number of pitchers are. But no, we'll get to that in a little bit, but no, I certainly don't feel that way. I do think for tournaments, Dylan Cease is someone we'll have a long conversation about. But Toronto and Washington, is there anything here specifically that does jump out to you, Adam? As of now, you've got the Nationals minus 116 on the money line, 5.5 run implied total, 5.1 implied run total for Toronto. I'm not really sure exactly what to make of pitching in this one.
I think it's a pretty decent spot for both offenses, but you're going to have that be the case throughout the slate because there's so many questionable pitchers. The one thing that really stands out is that if you look at what each pitcher does well, Anibal Sanchez doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but is actually pretty decent at limiting power. A 158 ISO to righties, 185 to lefties, and you do have a lot of power in the Toronto lineup. But the one thing that really stands out to me, aside from just both teams being high upside stacks, is that Trent Thornton struggles with left-handed power in particular. And you have a $2,600 Eric Dames hitting 6th for Washington. I think he looks like a really high upside value play.
It's a conversation we've had many times, particularly last year as it refers to Trent Thornton. He actually does some things well. He just doesn't do enough things well. And when you struggle as much as he does against one-handedness, it's going to get you into some trouble. You've got, again, really warm temperatures across the league today. 92 degrees at first pitch in Washington, and it won't drop below 90 for the entirety of this game, Adam. That's something I'd definitely be concerned about if I'm either one of these pitchers, even if you do a decent enough job of generating ground balls.
Yeah, really humid here too. And if you paid attention at all at the beginning of the season, it definitely seems like the rabbit balls are here. So neither team should have trouble scoring runs here.
All right, so just to wrap this game up and then get onto the main slate for DraftKings and obviously all of these games also on FanDuel. General takeaways from this Thornton and Sanchez matchup, pitching and hitting, if you had to sum it up in a couple sentences.
Both offenses, I think, are in good spots. They make for perfectly fine stacks. The one individual hitter that really stands out to me is Eric Dames on Washington batting sixth.
Okay, let's keep it moving then. 6:40 p.m. Eastern time is the Cubs and the Cincinnati Reds. That is on DraftKings. You have 7 games. We originally would have had 9 games. Now we have 7 games due to, well, I guess I could ask you about this first. Miami 14. I wanted to actually spend more time on this, but we're not going to have time. Miami had 14 players ultimately test positive for COVID-19. The Phillies, we don't know yet. I guess waiting on test results, but they're playing it safe, not going in to this matchup or this series against the New York Yankees. That game has been postponed because they just played a 3-game series and lost 2 against the Marlins. But apparently there have been no conversations of shutting the season down because a lot of this seems to be isolated within the Miami Marlins clubhouse.
Yeah, and I think that's how it should remain for now. I think that the biggest thing is that you need to put steps in place to not have this happen again or to spread. Like, you can't have a Miami team that clearly was infected just deciding between themselves and the Phillies players that, yeah, whatever, we'll just play.
How do you feel about a 2-week hiatus for the league and just go flat out herd immunity? I'm just joking. All right, let's keep moving then. You almost thought I was serious there.
Well, the lead-in was completely different from like the conclusion of what you said. So I was about to respond.
Give them 2 weeks to all get. Yeah, no, right, yeah. Exactly. The setup was a lot different than the crescendo, or what would it be? The finale? I don't know. The actual question. Nevertheless, Chicago Cubs, Cincinnati Reds, John Lester, $9,200 on DraftKings. Wade Miley weighing in at $6,000. Over on FanDuel, you've got Lester at 86, Miley at 68. These are 2 pitchers that I know you're the same way, particularly with John Lester. You do not like this guy. They don't give us a whole lot to talk about. Like, if you really try to dive into him, you have Miley who leans on a cutter. He sits 87 miles per hour on it. And then he's got a changeup that gets a decent amount of swings and misses, but not enough. He's like a 19-20% strikeout guy. And not to mention, just to set the table for you here, in the DFS world, we've had something called Misty Dongs for a while now. Started by Ben Pritchett. I know you know Ben. Meaning, after it rains, or if it's light rain at Cincinnati in Great American Ballpark, the balls are flying out of there. Well, you get some light rain, super humid, and winds blowing out to left field at 11 miles per hour. Might I add, Adam, that Great American Ballpark is arguably the most righty-friendly park in the league as well. So really good hitting weather here today. We'll see what Lester and Miley can, if they can contain the runs.
So you're saying you have a park that plays up right-handed power, especially to the pull side with the wind blowing out, and you have 2 pitchers that struggle to throw 90 miles an hour.
Both of them are left-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, this game will probably be 1-0, but it shouldn't be.
No question. Bet the under all day long on this.
But yeah, I mean, right-handed power should really play well in this game, and both of these teams have it. You know, you obviously have guys like Chris Bryant leading off, Javi Baez, Contreras, all good options from the Cubs side. And then looking at DraftKings pricing, you have a $2,600 Steven Souza batting 6th. That can come in handy as a value play. But the Reds, you know, they added Nick Castellanos to this team. You have Aristides Aquino, who hit the hell out of the ball last year, and there's no real reason to think that drops off. And then you have Suarez, who I believe is coming off a 49 home run season. So tons of right-handed power in this lineup, in favorable hitting conditions, in favorable matchups. Lester last year allowed a 185 ISO to righties. Wade Miley on the other side, only 148, but I still just don't totally buy into a guy with a 19% strikeout percentage being able to limit the right-handed power in this Cubs lineup.
Neither do I. And Aquino got off to a torrid start to the season, right? There's a completely unsustainable pace, but he was absolutely crushing it. He had 11 home runs in his first month, I think, or his first like 20 days being up. Might even have been less than that. I think it was less than that. And then he cooled off. But we still know the guy has exceptional power. And he's in the lineup here because, well, Matt Davidson hit the IL with COVID-19, and then Mike Moustakas had symptoms, and he hit the injured list despite a huge debut for the Cincinnati Reds. But yeah, I think the Reds here, is it the most formidable lineup? No, it's not terrifying. But as you mentioned, the middle of that lineup particularly is really good. So if you're stacking them, are you trying to be different? Do you want guys like Phillip Ervin, Joey Votto at the top? In terms of ownership, we can jump into that, but there's no denying that Suarez, Castellanos, and Aquino in that 3, 4, and 5 is the most appealing part of this lineup.
Yeah, if I'm stacking the Reds, I'm not looking to get too cute from an ownership standpoint because you're already taking a stack that isn't like it's going to be the highest owned on the slate or anything. And the entire merit to stacking the Reds is Suarez, Castellanos, and Aquino. So I think it's getting pretty cute if you were to start kind of dancing around that. But stacks built around those guys and then mixing in, Votto, Irvin, Christian Colon as value, I think are pretty high upside.
It is interesting that in our top stack tool, the Reds have higher ownership share than top stack probability, but I think there's still no question that, look, is John Lester a bad pitcher? No, he's not a bad pitcher. He's not a good fantasy pitcher, but he's not a particularly terrible pitcher. I still think this is a really appealing spot. Guy coughed up 26 home runs last year. He will give up power to right-handers. He's not as bad as he used to be when it comes to holding runners, but yeah, I still have quite a bit of interest in the Reds, particularly in the middle of this lineup. And like you said, the ownership's not going to be exceedingly high on them at all. So that's less of a concern. I don't need to get crazy by being different. Do you want to round out the conversation for the Cubs bats here against Wade Miley?
Yeah, I think it's primarily the right-handed power. He did improve his cutter last year, and it did a really good job limiting right-handed power. But as I mentioned before, even though he didn't give it up, he still only struck out about 19% of hitters. And so I'll take my chances on the power that guys like Bryant and Baez and Contreras bring to the table. Okay.
Yeah, and right now, like I said, both teams have implied run totals around or above 5. I think 5 and 5.2 last I looked. So there's definitely a lot to like here. Should be a high-scoring game on both sides of this one in this temperature with these conditions and humidity. If we look at the Atlanta Braves and the Tampa Bay Rays, you have Mike Foltynewicz and Tyler Glass. Now, we have a lot to talk about here, so I'll get started and pass it over to you, and you can start wherever you want. Mike Foltynewicz was sitting 90 miles per hour on his fastball in his last start before today. He said he's not super concerned. And it was more about the messy conditions, but I can't lie and say that I'm not a little bit concerned about something like this, especially given his price point. And then Tyler Glass now said he's going to take it inning by inning, and we're almost certain that he's going to be limited, even if he's pitching really well.
Yeah, missed some time from spring training 2.0 with COVID, and it's kind of weird, but it seems like the entire Tampa team has just decided not to be ready to pitch so far. You had Charlie Morton lose about 3 miles an hour on his stuff. You had Blake Snell, who it was reported to go 2 to 4 innings. He managed to go 2 through 46 pitches. So I haven't seen a specific pitch count on Glass now, but I don't think he's fully ready to go. And he is priced up to 8,900. He's obviously a phenomenal pitcher, and he's one of the most talented on the slate. So if we could be confident that he was really stretched out, it would be somewhat appealing. It is still a tough matchup against Atlanta, though. And on top of that, you're getting a lot of ownership going to Glass now. Right now on DraftKings, we have him projected at 61% ownership. So you're talking about a pitcher who's not really cheap, who has very, very legitimate question marks about how deep into the game he's going to be able to go. And he's got a mediocre matchup on top of it. So I think in the crunch that I ran before the show, I'm still getting the Glass now, but definitely would be under the field if he's going to come in at 60% owned.
Yeah, I'm worried about this. This is already a spot where Glass now has been a guy that's been, to some extent limited in the past. I know he had that forearm injury that kept him out for 4 months last year. I think it was around 4 months. He was out for a while. He's dealt with a decent amount, but coming back now, saying he's taking it inning by inning, he said he feels fine, and I don't see why he wouldn't, right? But there are some concerns here. I think the biggest point to make is the one that you just made. Blake Snell, because he's 8,900, and I know you said priced up, but some people are probably not looking at it like that because they might not even be paying attention to this expected pitch count. But he's coming in right now. What did you say his projected ownership was? 60%?
Yeah, on DraftKings, we have him at 61%, which is second only to Josh James.
That's crazy. So what do you expect? If he's coming in at 61.8%, as I'm seeing right now with the Awesemo ownership tool, what would you be comfortable with, knowing that he's almost certainly not going to go more than 5 innings? And if he does, that's going to be surprising.
So here's the thing and it has to do with the DraftKings pricing. You're not going to be comfortable really at all because who knows how deep he's going into the game. But there's just nothing else to go to either. Like when I look at the pitchers that I was getting in the crunch that I ran before the show, and this is factoring in ownership. So the fact that, Glasnow is at 60% is driving down how much I got. I got 14% of him, but then the alternatives were going to guys like Mike Montgomery and Kendall Graveman. So it's not like I have a great solution to SP2 that doesn't involve Glasnow. It's more of just, I think that there's a bigger edge. Like if you played this slate 1,000 times, I think there's a bigger edge in being under the field on a 9K pitcher with serious question marks that's owned by nearly 2/3 of the field than rolling the dice on him.
Another thing too is this isn't exactly a cupcake matchup against the Atlanta Braves, So
right, yeah. And the funny thing is that's like the third thing that you get to when you talk about reasons to kind of be questioning this Glasnow ownership.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. There's some legitimate concerns here, but you might just be forced into it to some extent. Maybe we can find some other options along the way. It's going to be easier on FanDuel. Everybody's cheap, and you only have to roster one of them. On DraftKings, it's an entirely different situation. What about bats here? Because, look, I'm not getting the faulty here. You might not be worried about the velocity, but here's my whole issue with it. Do I think it's a huge concern? No, probably not. But I don't have to worry about it when he's $10,300.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't feel like we really have to worry too much about the velocity because you can tell me Fulty's throwing as hard as ever and he's 10-3 against Tampa. So I'm still not going to be all that excited about it.
Right. What about bats here?
Not really that appealing, I don't think. The game's in Tampa, so it's in the Dome. It's in a pitcher's park. Glasnow is a good pitcher, obviously. Fulty isn't bad by any stretch, but the opportunity cost to taking guys in the dome when you have so many games out in the heat and humidity this time of year is pretty high. And then when you factor in that both pitchers are really good, there's nobody that's really going to jump out. Tsutsugo batting fourth for Tampa Bay. Talked about him on the show with EMAC on Saturday when he was only 2K, but every projection system has this guy with an ISO over 200. So going there for value certainly gives you some upside, but I think it'll probably be used by a lot of people as well.
Did you see the amount of home runs this guy was hitting before he came to Major League Baseball?
No, I didn't. I had no idea who he was until the other day.
Oh, dude. Outrageous numbers, this guy. In the Japanese league, he was averaging like 45 homers a season. It's just crazy.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I guess the last couple of years he was like 38, 28, but then 44, 45. Yeah, so not every year, but he had some really solid campaigns. The guy's definitely got power. And I believe his first MLB hit was a home run. So that would be one spot I'd be interested in as well. He's coming in on DraftKings at what's his price at?
3,300.
As you yeah, 3,300. That's worth it to me. And another reason for that is Foltynewicz has been one of the hardest pitchers to predict. He's dealt with some injuries. I understand that, but he has outings where he unravels. And against the Marlins in that game last week, I think it was, where he was only sitting 90 miles per hour, hovering between 89 and 91. He gave up 3 consecutive home runs to the Miami Marlins. I get it. A tune-up game, no big deal. But he's the type of guy that can completely implode. 3,300 on Tsutsugo to me is more than appealing at a very cheap price point, especially with all pitchers priced up on DraftKings. You're going to need to find something.
Yeah. 228 ISO to lefties last year for Fulty. Steamer projects Tsutsugo for a 223 ISO and a 122 WRC plus.
Yeah, that's pretty good, especially the ISO. All right, Milwaukee and Pittsburgh. Here's another battle of the juggernauts on the mound. Adrian Hauser and Steven Brault. Oof, man, Brault's been dealing with a shoulder injury for the past 9 years, something that even affected him coming into this season. I kid you not. And then Adrian Hauser, he's all right, Adam, but the problem is, even though he struck lefties and righties out, I think at 25% last season, and maybe this Pittsburgh lineup isn't the most formidable in terms of power, and it's a good park at PNC for pitchers, they don't strike out a lot at all. If you look at their collective K rate against righties, it's not going to get you excited for someone like Hauser.
No, not at all. And he's another one that's priced up. Like when we started talking about this game, for a second, I was just like, oh, wait, why aren't I getting to Adrian Hauser? He's a good pitcher and he's normally like 6,500, but he's 8,300 today on DraftKings. It's a good implied run total, 4.1 for Pittsburgh, but just really a lack of strikeout upside there. If I'm going to take risks if I'm going to take pitchers that I don't think project very well, I'd rather just take ones that also aren't very expensive. So I think it'll be pretty tough to get to him. And then on the other side, I'm not interested in Brault. I think it's a tough matchup here against a lot of right-handed power. You look at Lorenzo Cain, Keston Hiura, Ryan Braun, Jed Jerko, Avisail Garcia, all in the top 6 of this lineup. The only non-right-handed bat in there is Christian Yelich, who of course is great regardless. Brault last year gave up a 184 ISO to right-handed hitters, only struck out 18%. So I think it sets up really well for these right-handed bats on Milwaukee.
The Brewers have the second highest projected ownership share on this slate. Top stack percentage, or probability of 11%. That comes in as the second highest. So it's, the ratio there isn't bad, Adam. It is not a great park, but if you just mentioned right there, I don't really care where they're hitting. This is a very dangerous lineup and one that I don't have any issue stacking, particularly against Steven Brault. Would you say they're one of your favorite stacks today?
So right now I'm not getting to as much of them as I expected. And I think that just has to do with the ownership on the Mets being lower, the ownership on the Cubs being lower, and then I'm getting to some Boston bats as well. I certainly don't have any problem with the Brewers. And I think that, like I said, I think they're in a good spot, but I think you're also going to see some pretty healthy ownership because outside of Yelich, these guys are really cheap. The most expensive guy in the lineup outside of Yelich is Keston Hiura at 4,400. So I think you'll get a lot of ownership going there. And right now, with the way ownership sets up, I'm going to some other teams that are up at the top.
All right. Any interest in the Pittsburgh Pirates here? Adrian Hauser last year faced 210 lefties. He faced 252 righties. So he got a decent amount of work in. If there's one thing he did pretty well, he got a decent amount of strikeouts. Not a big swinging strike rate guy, but he's good at getting those called strikes. He actually had a called plus swinging strike rate of almost 30 and a swinging strike rate below 10%. So it's actually a little bit concerning, especially in warm weather. But he doesn't allow a ton of home runs. It's just, again, the fact that he's priced up makes it pretty untenable. It also doesn't have me salivating to get to these Pittsburgh bats either, though.
No, he's not really a pitcher that I want to pick on. And the best argument that you would normally be able to make for Pittsburgh is that they're really, really cheap outside of Josh Bell, but there's no pitching to pay up for here. I don't feel the need to sacrifice all the offenses that are in great spots just to be able to get to Fulte and James or whatever. So I won't be going to Pittsburgh.
All right. Let's keep it moving then. White Sox, Cleveland Indians. Here's one. I got the White Sox. I already put a bet down on the White Sox to win this game, Adam. Aaron Savali, all right, sure. Dylan Cease. This is just a spot where I think he's good enough to come in here and put up solid numbers. Faced Cleveland last year, had 11 strikeouts, so maybe he can do it again. But besides the point, Dylan Cease is expensive on DraftKings. Absolutely. It's pretty scary going up against a pretty talented Cleveland lineup, a Cleveland lineup that actually has a Cleveland team that has a 5.1 run implied total right now. But he is somebody that I'm going to be, that I have interest in tournaments, and he's probably not going to be, an optimizer type play. I don't see any way that he would be, especially given his numbers last year. But look, he sits 97 on his fastball. He touches 100 miles per hour. He's got a curveball that can buckle you or can get you to swing out of your shoes. And he's got a changeup that gets pretty good results when he's on. So look, last year as a rookie, tough season. That happens with a lot of really good pitchers. I was, Glasnow and Blake Snell were two guys that I was in love with, and I stood by their side until the end. And now look at them. I think that's going to happen with Dylan Cease. Will it be tonight against Cleveland? I can't say, but I do know that he's very talented, and we're going to start getting games sooner than later where he goes very under-owned and ends up having monster performances with double-digit strikeouts. That's my wrap on Dylan Cease.
Yeah, I think that he's got really, really good stuff. I think that last year, the strikeout stuff played once he came up to the majors. He struck out about 25%, still walked almost 11% of hitters, which is a problem for him right now. And the dangerous hitters on Cleveland certainly don't make me feel any better about that. Also worth mentioning that there's legitimate rain concerns in this game. So on top of the Dylan Cease facing the Indians risk, you also get some weather risk that maybe you get a delay thrown in there.
But, go ahead.
So I think that, I agree with all your points about him being a high upside guy. I'm still not getting there on DraftKings. I would rather just pivot out of that price range entirely than pay for one of the other less than appealing options that are priced around Glass now. On FanDuel, he's the same price range as Josh James, which makes him somewhat appealing. One conversation I was having with someone in Slack is that it's the problem kind of is that, like, in a vacuum, James is getting way more ownership than Cease. So it's easy to look and say, well, I think Cease beats him more than, 1 out of 5 times or whatever. But the problem is that, like, that's the first place that it's the most obvious place to look. So, like, if I'm someone that is at least somewhat aware of ownership and I'm looking to build a FanDuel lineup with my 2 favorite stacks, the first thing I'm thinking is, I can just make James into Dylan Cease. So I think that there's going to be kind of like a relatively high ownership on Cease among a certain lineup build. So that pivot might not be quite as appealing as it seems at first glance.
Okay. Could be. It's possible. James is 72% on DraftKings, Dylan Cease at 3.6, but that's less important than the next one. Tyler Glass now $500 less expensive, so they're pretty much the same tier. 61.8%, Dylan Cease 3.6. So that there is why I have interest in him on DraftKings. Obviously, I think a lot of people would say, well, wouldn't you be more interested on FanDuel? Not necessarily, because you have to play 2 pitchers. James and Glass now are both getting a ton of ownership. Dylan Cease is getting sub 4% right now. At least that's what he's projected for. And I'm only paying an additional $500. Now, is the matchup tougher? I guess so, but it's not like Atlanta's matchup is not like a matchup with Atlanta is easy. Ultimately, Tyler Glass now is a more proven pitcher than Dylan Cease, but I don't know if it justifies like 58% higher ownership on him when we don't even know if Glass now gets through 4 innings. That's kind of where I stand on maybe getting away from the field a little bit there.
So when I ran my crunch before the show, it was with our previous ownership projections that had Cease at 14%. So that had some impact on why I don't have much. Looking at my numbers, I have like what I think their ownerships should be. I have Cease only slightly below Glass now. So I agree with you. If you're going to that price range, it makes sense on DraftKings to make that pivot. I think it's a positive spot to pivot. The way my lineups are coming out, or I'm just completely forgoing that price range in most of them. So that's why my ownership on him is a little bit lower. But I completely agree with you that the ownership gap between these two should not be nearly as big as it is. The caveat being that the weather here does look like a legitimate concern.
Yeah, and Adam, if you gave me even money on Dylan Cease to go over, 6 innings or under, I wouldn't even. It's not like I'd say, hammer the over. Not that at all. It's just if a guy is not coming in with any ownership, and I know that he's super talented, there's definitely that possibility that he comes out of this game with 9 strikeouts in 6 innings. So I think that's worth considering.
Yeah, for sure. I'm updating my ownership. I'm updating the ownership now to see how much, if any, it changes for me as far as where I would get to on DraftKings. Again, this is ignoring the weather. I haven't decided yet what I'm doing with this.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know how teams are going to approach this. We already saw a game get called after 5 innings. It's hard to say, but you're right. Weather definitely plays a role there, so be sure to pay attention to that.
Once I updated for him being like 4% instead of 14, he ends up being my second highest owned pitcher on DraftKings.
Wow. That's a huge change because didn't you have none of them before?
I had 5 before. Now I have 35.
Okay. So I guess the smart move here would be pay attention to the last ownership run.
Yeah. And also
Awesemo.
Yeah. And keep an eye on the weather. So to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm playing 35% Dylan Cease.
That's what you got. Yeah.
With the numbers right now, it looks like a good pivot off Glass now.
Right. And like it's going to be relatively hot there, but it's pretty hot everywhere. So Glass now does have the advantage, though, when it comes to pitching at the Trop. in the closed roof. So there's that. Talk to me about Savali, and if you don't have much to say there, let's talk about hitters in this game.
I don't have much to say there. Struck out about 20% of hitters last year. He's priced up in the same tier as Cease and Glasnow and Josh James and Folty. The White Sox aren't a bad lineup. They're a really scary lineup to take guys against. Savali doesn't miss a lot of bats. A limited sample. He did strike out about 26% of lefties compared to 16% of righties. Got a ton of swings and misses on his curveball against left-handed hitters. But it's just a really scary lineup for Chicago, and I don't want to pay that price point for Savali.
Yeah, I have the White Sox winning their division, so I'm not going to be picking on them a whole lot this year. I do imagine I'm going to be stacking the White Sox a lot. Savali and not all that appealing. Let me just throw you these numbers and see where you come in at. Right now, the Chicago White Sox have projected ownership, collective ownership here as a team at 2%, one of the lowest on the slate, and top stack probability somewhere in the middle, much higher than their ownership. You can check all of this out. You can check all of this out at Awesemo.com. By the way, Awesemo.com/join. Ownership projections, the top stack tool, all of them created and used by Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. We don't just slap a name on it. He uses these tools. And if you didn't see what he did in MLB last year, take a look. Just the most ridiculous season I've ever seen. And by the way, if you ever do sign up, we're always happy to help you figure out how to learn these tools. Anybody here, just hit us up and we'll be happy to give you a hand in Slack or anywhere else. We have a premium Slack chat. Awesemo.com/join. If you want to get 50% off all access, everything, Awesemo Plus, the Platinum, all of our sports, use the promo code RESTART at checkout. The coupon code RESTART when you check out, you'll get 50% off your entire month. So all of the projections, the ownership, the top stack tool, the lineup builder, all of the premium articles, the rankings, you name it, everything we've got 50% off. Just use the promo code RESTART at checkout. Go to awesemo.com/join. Okay. A little impromptu read there. I wanted to get this out of the way so we got some time going forward. Any other thoughts on the White Sox hitters here, Adam?
It looks like they are going under-owned as a stack, so I think that if the weather does cooperate, it's a good spot to get to in tournaments.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much where I come in on this one as well. Let's talk about Detroit and Kansas City. You've got the Detroit Tigers with Burrows expected to be your probable long reliever. Michael Fulmer, who didn't pitch a single inning last year, making his triumphant return as the opener. And then Mike Montgomery on the opposite side of this one for the Kansas City Royals. Now, I know you mentioned earlier in the day that Mike Montgomery was someone that you were getting a decent amount of. Royals have a 4.8 run implied total. Amazingly, 5.3 run implied total for the Detroit Tigers. Is that higher than you thought it would be, or does the weather here with the wind blowing out considerably make that difference? Because I don't think it does. It's higher than I thought, man. I guess the Royals have a bad bullpen too.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's higher than I thought it would be. I would say it's probably higher than I think it should be.
There you go. That's fair.
But yeah, and I mean, I mentioned Montgomery to you. It's not like I feel really good about this spot. There is plenty of it's an entirely right-handed lineup for the Tigers, but there's just so little pitching on this slate. I think that among the cheap pitchers, Montgomery is one of the better ones. Still only struck out about 18% of righties last year, gave up a ton of power. It's not a spot you're going to feel safe whatsoever, but I'd rather roll the dice on a 6,500 Montgomery at low ownership than pay for a lot of these priced up arms on DraftKings.
Okay. And then obviously on FanDuel, no interest whatsoever. He's priced basically the same as other pitchers that are markedly better than he is.
Yeah, no interest on FanDuel.
So he did have, here, let me make it feel a little bit better. It won't, but it might make some people. He had one double-digit strikeout game last season, Adam. You know who that came against?
Tigers.
Yep, 12 strikeouts, 7 scoreless innings. Matter of fact, every other start he had was 6 or fewer. I think he had one with 7. 12 strikeouts against the Tigers. I remember that game because I was shocked when I looked at the box score and saw what he had done. But we can agree, he is not a particularly high upside pitcher. He is not somebody that usually goes deep into games, but it is against Detroit. And, well, we don't exactly have a bevy of options to choose from outside of him, particularly on DraftKings.
Yeah, and he was someone that I'd kind of come around on as a cheap pitcher last year because his ability to get hitters to chase pitches out of the strike zone is actually above average, and that's something that normally leads to increased swinging strike percentages and strikeouts. It hasn't really been the case for him, but he at least has some stat going in his favor that makes me feel a little bit better.
You found something. I got you. All right, hitters here. Are you interested in Tiger bats, even though you've got a decent amount of Montgomery, knowing that they have a total up north of 3?
They're really cheap.
Sorry, north of 5.
Yeah, I mean, they're really cheap. CJ Cron batting cleanup at 3,300 on DraftKings. Jonathan Scopes, 3,400. I don't know if maybe that gets some ownership going to them, but as one-offs, I think both of those guys look good.
Kansas City bats against the starter and long reliever scenario or setup for the Detroit Tigers. Go ahead.
Pricing on this team is so cheap, I keep thinking I'm looking at FanDuel pricing. But on DraftKings, $2,900 Salvador Perez, $3,500 Mondesi, $3,800 Soler. They're going to get ownership because they're so cheap. But yeah, I think that they're good values. Like Michael.
That's weird. You forgot to mention someone.
Whit Merrifield? Oh, Ryan O'Hearn.
Ryan the Goat O'Hearn. Yeah, $2,300.
These guys are priced for like peak Michael Fulmer, but Michael Fulmer is coming back from, I think, Tommy John surgery. He's a pure opener here. So I think the pricing is just clearly wrong in Kansas City.
It is really strange. Like, listen, O'Hearn 2 years ago, crushed righties. Last year, he became Ryan O'Hearn again, but he's batting 5th at $2,300. You couldn't be more spot on with this because how often do you see 5-hole hitters on any team, regardless of how good they are, below like 3,000 on DraftKings? It's crazy.
Yeah. I did a double check because I just assumed I was looking at FanDuel pricing. So you said Bo Burrows coming in after Fulmer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had AAA last year. Burrows struck out 20.5%, walked almost 11%. Doesn't look like anything special.
All right.
According to FanGraphs, he's the number 20 prospect on Detroit.
And he's a righty too. I don't know how many innings we should expect him to go here. I didn't look up stolen base numbers on him either, which would be relatively important if Mondesi didn't just steal on everybody.
Right. I don't have his minor league stolen base numbers in front of me, but they're going to run regardless.
Exactly. I lost a tournament once on a caught stealing. I lost by, I think, 0.6. Caught stealing used to be -2 on DraftKings. You don't have to deal with that anymore. So just run no matter what. If you get caught, it sucks, but you're not getting docked points for that. So, Mondesi, this is great. Mondesi last year, I think, had an absurd amount of stolen bases before he went down because he only played like 100 games or something. I don't know if you would remember, but he played 102 games. He had 43 stolen bases at 3,500. This seems like the whole team seems like a mispricing to me. They're not good, but yeah, I don't know. How about this? They have the 6th highest top stack potential. Now they are going to be one of the higher owned teams, Adam. So you can close this one out. Final thoughts on Kansas City bats in Detroit.
Yeah, I like Kansas City. I mean, you just have to make sure that you're being contrarian somewhere else, but it's not like they're just a pure value play. Like you do get upside in a guy, Soler hit 46 home runs last year, I think. Mondesi steals 1 million bases. Merrifield's good. Perez covers the catcher position for you. It's not one of those stacks where you're taking value and you're not getting any upside. These guys do actually have pretty legitimate ceilings.
SuperDraft has their slate start tonight at 6:40 as well. So you have a little bit of additional time. These guys will help you out on Live Before Lock coming up at 5:50 Eastern. We got a bit of a late start today. And if you haven't checked it out, SuperDraft, it's no salaries, all multipliers. So it's kind of crazy, actually. Tyler Glass now has a 1.6 multiplier today. So you get 1.6, take his fantasy points and multiply it by 1.6. Dylan Cease. What's Dylan Cease coming in at? He's got to be 2 times multiplier on Cease. Oh, man. Absolutely loving it. You can play whoever you want because there's no salaries, but you have to make that decision whether getting 1x on a pitcher is worth that when you could get 1.5x on another guy that could absolutely demolish him once you get that multiplier in there. So if you haven't checked it out, they've got the $20,000 or the $10,000 moonshot tonight, 2K up top. Legitimately winnable tournaments here. Multi-entry of 29 on this one, by the way. And you get free money, free super cash just by signing up. I'll tell you how to do so right now. Use the promo code AWESEMO10, AWESEMO10, all one word. Get $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more. Or if you deposit $100 or more, you get $20 free on that deposit. Use the sign-up code AWESEMO10 when you do. Check it out. It is a really fun format. It's different, but everything you've done in terms of researching for DraftKings and FanDuel each day can be applied over here. It's not like your process has to be entirely different, which is, very helpful. But pay attention to the multipliers. You're going to get some really good value as well at SuperDraft.io or download it in the App Store. All right, Adam. Keep it moving here. A couple games to go, and then we'll hand it over to the Live Before Lock crew. Houston and Seattle. Here it is, Josh James. I'll let you run with it. He's going up against Kendall Graveman. But first, we've got to start with Josh James, who is particularly popular today on DraftKings, 72.4% projected ownership, 46.9% on FanDuel. But he is unquestionably going to be the highest owned player across the board.
Yeah, when the first thing I saw today was his projected ownership, and I just assumed it was an error. But then once you dig into the slate, I just haven't really been able to find a reason to get away from him, because with the weird season and the weird startup to the season, you just have so many question marks about different pitchers coming in, and it's hard to find someone that checks all the boxes. But James is the one pitcher on this slate that does, because first of all, he's got a good matchup against a Seattle team that isn't very good, that has plenty of strikeouts in their lineup. Two, he's got really good strikeout stuff. Last year, struck out about 38% of hitters in the majors. Granted, that was almost entirely as a reliever. But if you go back to 2018, he started 17 games at AAA. He struck out 35% of hitters. The strikeout stuff's never been an issue for him. And then while we're dealing with a lot of these pitchers not being fully stretched out, that's not the case for Josh James either, as I believe he threw 82 pitches in his most recent game. So you're not dealing with that. It's just he checks all the boxes. Does that mean he's going to go out there and have a good start today? Not necessarily, but I think the likelihood for him being the high scorer is really high on the slate. The salary is dirt cheap on FanDuel, and it's very affordable on DraftKings as well when you compare him to all the other pitchers that are more expensive than him. So I just haven't been able to find a reason to get James.
Okay. Yeah. And as of now, I think you mentioned it already, but just to reinforce this, you do have him as your highest owned pitcher, correct?
Yeah, by a mile.
By a mile. All right. The thing is, there's not even a whole lot to get into, because you can't really stack him up, or you can't stack other guys up against him here. And that's the thing. Like if you're looking for upside, you're looking for strikeouts, and you're looking for a matchup that, I don't know, isn't perfect, but it's also definitely not a bad one. You're going to be hard pressed to really look anywhere else. Yeah, it's actually a pretty bad lineup, to be honest. I try and be fair here, but that's not all that threatening. We'll move on, because there's not even much else to talk about with Josh James. You're right. It's just a pretty easy decision. Kendall Graveman. Well, I can say one good thing about him, Adam. Apparently, he is popping 97 on the four-seamer and said he figured it out over quarantine, but that's about where I end.
Yeah, I mean, he throws hard. He's someone that I've always thought should have better results than he does. I don't think that the Astros are a spot where it's really likely to come out. That being said, in large field tournaments, I don't hate having some of him on DraftKings solely because he's $4,900. You look at the guys down at the bottom. I don't want Zach Godley. I like Graveman more than Brault, and there's nothing really else down there. So he's in consideration just as a dirt cheap SP2, where you're pretty much just hoping that all the pitchers suck and you have one of the cheapest ones. But outside of that, there's nothing positive to say about Graveman.
He is cheap. I'll give you that. He is cheap. Man, Springer, Altuve, Bregman, Brantley, Gurriel, Correa, Reddick, Tucker, Garnell. That's scary. 5.9 run applied total. I think it's actually the highest on the slate, but your points make sense. It's just a scary thought knowing that he could be in the lineup. I guess if there's ever a time to play I was going to call him a shitbag, but that's not nice. I've never met the guy. If there ever was a time to play a less than stellar, number 5 type pitcher in the rotation, it would be tonight, where there aren't a ton of top tier options that you're worried about fading and having it come back and bite you. So there's that.
Right. Like that's the path. Like, I'm not looking at Graveman saying, oh man, he's 4,900 and I think he's likely to get me like 15 points. It's more of, I think his median projection is somewhere in like the 6 to 7 point range, but the median projection for most of the pitchers on the slate is like less than 10. So you're kind of just hoping that they all do what they're projected to do, and you just have the cheapest pitcher on a slate where none of the pitchers win you anything.
Yep. I have no issues with the reasoning. What about the bats here? Houston, I just rattled off that lineup. It's still a really threatening and formidable lineup from top to bottom every single night that they stay healthy.
Yeah, some really cheap bats in there too. I mean, obviously you have Springer, Altuve, Bregman, who are really expensive at the top. And I think that'll drive down Houston's ownership and also just make it really difficult to get to them. But $3,300 Brantley is a pretty nice value. $2,700 for Reddick is cheaper than really any hitter should be. Any remotely competent hitter should be on a team with a 6 implied run total.
All right. 5 down, well, 6 down if you include FanDuel. I think we only got, no. We got 7 down. Damn. All right.
Got the Red Sox left, right?
We got 1 to go. Yeah. Forgot we had 2 postponed. Baltimore, Miami, New York Yankees, Phillies. For anybody just tuning in now, living under a rock all day long, both of those games have been postponed, so they're not on the slate. We've got 1 left here on an island on DraftKings in between Baltimore, Miami, and New York, Philly. We got Boston at home facing the New York Mets at Fenway Park. Michael Wacha. Ooh, all right. And Zach Godley as your probable long reliever. I DM'd you today. And I said, you remember that season where Zach Godley was really good and had that really good curveball? That's long gone.
Yeah, it's still weird because like I still get scared stacking against him because I just wait for it to come back. But I think right now the Mets are my favorite stack on the slate. You have Josh Osich getting the start as a pure opener. You have Godley behind him, who hasn't shown the ability to be a good pitcher in a while. And relative to the other teams at the top of the top stack tool in terms of top stack percentage, the Mets are getting lower ownership than most. So I think that as long as that holds and they're getting, they're getting less ownership, I think that it's a really high upside spot for them. They're running a pretty decent lineup out there. Alonso obviously batting second. He's expensive, so that should keep his ownership down. They're an expensive stack throughout, so I think that it's a spot where you can pay up to be a little bit contrarian, especially if a lot of the field is doing the Josh James and Tyler Glasnow combo. It's going to be really hard for them to stack the Mets.
This game, by the way, has an exceedingly high total. It opened at 10.5, and it's up to 11.5. We've seen a lot of this since the season started. These totals and obviously implied totals are getting bet up a lot. Opened at 10.5. It's up to 11.5. How about this? The Mets implied total, Adam, opened at 5.2. It's up to 6. And Boston opened at 5.4. It's up to 5.7. So a lot of runs expected to be in this game. Temperatures 93 degrees at first pitch. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I like both offenses a lot in this game. Obviously we talked about the Mets side, but then on the Red Sox side, you have a bit cheaper pricing. $3,700 for Benintendi leading off, I think puts him in cash game consideration and is one of the better values on the play or on the day. Xander Bogaerts is cheap batting cleanup, so is Moreland. So whereas the Mets are really expensive, you have Boston in these good hitting conditions that are really cheap, facing a very mediocre pitcher in Michael Wacha, who is, I don't think, very good. He seems to somehow always burn me, but since last season, he allowed a 196 ISO to lefties, only struck out 19% of them, 224 ISO to righties, only struck out 19%. So pretty much equal opportunity as far as who he gives up power to. And you obviously have a ton of it throughout this Red Sox lineup that's really deep, which the lineup being so deep means that even if the stack as a whole or the team as a whole is getting a lot of ownership, you can kind of be contrarian within those stacks, because even getting toward the bottom of the lineup, Alex Verdugo, Jackie Bradley, Jose Peraza, these are all relatively high upside guys for 7, 8, and 9 hitters.
Waka allowed 2.1 home runs per 9 to righties last year. So he got banged. He got knocked around a lot facing same-handed bats. Yeah, good luck going up against JD and Bogarts. It's a spot where Boston could come out here and put up lofty totals. Again, both teams with implied run totals, some of the highest on the slate, an 11.5 over under at Fenway. Yeah. And then you've got a left field that really favors these righty bats. So like you said, it's no doubt equal opportunity in terms of being able to get to Michael Wacha. But power struggles were even more defined against righties last year than they were against lefties. And I don't think any of the prices here are outrageous. Devers at 5.2 is up there, but outside of that, it's not that nuts. If you don't have anything else on this game, let's get into, we've got 2 minutes here, and then live before lock with Alex Baker, Chris Spags coming up next, taking you till 6:40. Let's get into top stacks and top pitchers. Before we do, hit that thumbs up. It helps us out greatly with that, YouTube algorithm. It's true, man. It's true. It gets it to more eyes out there, helps more people see it, and it really gives us a big leg up. So we appreciate all the time when you guys do something as small as that to support us here at Awesemo. And subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. If you haven't done so yet, you'll always know when new shows and new live streams are dropping every single time just by clicking that bell. All right, man, let's do it. Top pitchers. I know it's not easy, but give me your top 3 today.
Oh, God. So on DraftKings, it's clearly Josh James, number 1 on any site. On DraftKings, I would also throw in Mike Montgomery because he's cheap, and then Dylan Cease as a tournament pivot off of Glasnow.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at too. James, Dylan Cease, and I guess Montgomery. That ownership on Glasnow to me is outrageous given the matchup and given the issues that he's had going inning by inning. It scares me, but I suppose he's probably up there as well. If I'm mentioning Montgomery, I guess so. But Montgomery's also considerably cheaper. Top stacks, your favorite 3.
Just updated with the update to our top stack tool where the Mets and the Red Sox ownership went up. So right now my top 3 are the Cubs, the Mets, and the White Sox, weather depending.
Okay. Cubs, Mets, White Sox. Like the Mets a lot. Like the White Sox quite a bit, especially given the difference in ownership and top stack probability. And you know what? If you do want to get a look, I guess I could throw Kansas. Oh, no, actually, Kansas City updated. That's not good. I'll throw Milwaukee in there as well. Not too worried about the park. I think this is a good spot for a bunch of righties against Stephen Brault. That'll do it for us. Thanks for hanging out. As always, remember, hit that thumbs up, but don't go anywhere. Same stream. Stick around right here, live before lock. Alex Baker, Chris Spags coming up next, taking you till that 6:40 lock here. It's the Awesemo Deeper Dive. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern.
What's up, guys? We should be starting up now, and hello, everybody. Welcome to another day of Live Before Lock, and gonna be an adventurous hour or so here talking MLB as things change right between us, right between the moments between the shows. I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by a man who's the best equipped to help me out through this turbulent day in Major League Baseball, the top DFS player in the world, the namesake of this YouTube channel, and of course, Awesemo.com. His name is Alex Baker, better known to you as Awesemo. How are you doing, Alex?
Good. I got to talk about this breaking news real quick because the Indians game was postponed. So with Lock in 10 minutes on FanDuel, make sure to remove those guys if you can from your lineups. If not, I mean, the official start wouldn't be for another hour. So not super urgent, but that is the big news right now. Anyway, Spags, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm going to be changing my Cleveland Indians lineups that I had lovingly crafted before the show. Is feeling good about going against Dylan Cease. But you know what, guys? The important thing that you need to know out there right now is if you want some late-breaking data for FanDuel, of course, their slate locking in just about 15 minutes, as well as the DraftKings slate, which is locking a little bit later. SuperDraft, same thing. All that data is at your fingertips if you go to Awesemo.com/join. Use the promo code RESTART. Our various MLB coupons expired over the weekend, but Restart is still going strong to get you half off your first month of all sport access to Awesemo Plus at Awesemo.com/join. So use that promo code RESTART to get yourself the player projections, ownership projections, top stacks tool, top pitchers tool for MLB, as well as all the PGA, NBA, NASCAR, everything else going on in the sports world. You get all of that with your Awesemo Plus membership. Use that promo code RESTART at Awesemo.com/join. So go do that right now at Awesemo.com/join. And of course, make sure to check out our presenting sponsor, SuperDraft. They've had a ton of overlay with MLB starting up as they try to get the word out. But more importantly, for all of you guys out there, they're offering special deals with any deposit you make on there. If you use the promo code Awesemo10 at SuperDraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store. So use that promo code Awesemo10, AWESEMO10 at SuperDraft.io or on the SuperDraft app and get $10 free with your first deposit of $10 or more, $20 free if you deposit more than $100. But take advantage of those deals. We'll talk some SuperDraft a bit later on. But either way, you should be playing on SuperDraft every single day for your own bankroll as well as for us, your friends here at Awesemo. So go do that at SuperDraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store and use that promo code Awesemo10. All right, Alex, let's go right away to the nitty gritty. And I feel like you mentioned the FanDuel slate, and there is one game to touch on real fast. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about the Blue Jays and the Washington Nationals. Is a game that's on FanDuel because of their early lock time. It's not available on DraftKings. I don't believe it's on. Well, if it's on SuperDraft, it's not on the main slate. So what are you doing here, Alex, with this game today? It's not one that I prep for because I'm not playing FanDuel today with all the moving pieces. But give me some thoughts.
Well, the first thought is I'm not playing Bo Bichetti because he was just scratched 2 minutes ago. So if you have FanDuel lineups, make sure to take him out of your lineups. I'm actually having some issues editing my lineups on FanDuel. I don't know if anyone else is having problems, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But I'm sure if other people are having issues, there's probably some serious tilt given all this breaking news. But
Yes.
yeah, so I think anytime when you have a slate that's not on, or a game that's not on other sites, since the market is kind of, the market leader is DraftKings, like a lot of people like focus their content around that. So a lot of people might not be looking as closely into this game, and therefore it may go a little bit underowned.
So definitely some upside there as well. Two teams, again, Trent Thornton pitching for Toronto as the deeper dive guys mentioned right before us. Anibal Sanchez going for Washington. Pretty decent implied run totals here. So perhaps worth getting some FanDuel exposure in right now before that game locks in just a few short moments. 6:05 Eastern time is that one. And let's talk about the rest of the slate, Alex, because everything is changing right before our eyes. As I mentioned before we came on the air, the White Sox-Indians game was postponed. That joins the Yankees game, as well as the Orioles game going against Miami. Miami, of course, the hotbed of coronavirus. They're not available. Philadelphia, a team that brought me some joy and much sadness this weekend against Miami. They are also in the storm, so to speak, of the coronavirus spread. So their game won't be happening against the Yankees. And the weather is what's affecting that Cleveland Indians game against the White Sox, though there was also a report that the White Sox manager is being quarantined for potential COVID risk. So maybe a little bit of a merger of issues going on in that game, but another one, as Alex mentioned, to get out of your lineups now. So Alex, I guess the overall thought and the question here, how does this stuff change the slate for you? Because we also have some moving parts around weather. And it's ownership's going to update, player projections are going to update, some of the Vegas totals may update as well. But how does this change your views on the slate? Was there anybody who you felt like you'd be relying on heavily who now you need to get away from? Because for me, that was Cleveland. I loved Cleveland going against Cease. I thought he was going to pick up a good amount of ownership today. And Cleveland now off the table for me. So how does this change your outlook on the slate?
Yeah, I have to admit, I was kind of fond of Cleveland too. So I think that the main thing I'll point out is that we're going to have dead money on this slate. So like, as long as you're updating your lineup to account for all this news, like Bichetti being scratched, which will be significant on FanDuel because that's like 10 minutes before game time. And also the Cleveland Indians game being postponed. I think a significant number of people aren't going to adjust. So as long as you do that, you're going to have an edge over a decent amount of people.
Also, some people in the YouTube chat pointing out that FanDuel is, in fact, having issues for everybody. So hopefully they figure that out. Of course, our friends from doing some our simulations earlier in quarantine. So we always want to see FanDuel thriving, but you might have to hit the refresh button a bunch or prepare those consumer complaint letters immediately, I guess. Two suggestions there. So, Alex, I guess with all these moving parts again, and we're waiting for updates on the top stack tool, I'm sure some of these you're working on right now. How do you see the slate shifting overall? I mean, there's going to be a lot of vacated ownership. Cleveland was a team who projected to have less ownership than their chance of being a top stack. The White Sox as well, also not going to be too highly owned. Do you think this changes the equation for a team like the Mets, who we have projected to be the top stack on the day, but also going to have some pretty decent ownership on them? Or, I mean, how do you see this overall trickling down for the parts that players are going to have to worry about? Do you think somebody gets particularly more chalky as a result of this game joining the other two not on the slate?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that when I was building my lineups, I was getting a ton of like Kansas City, a ton of Boston, and those teams are only going to be chalkier with fewer teams to choose from. Baseball is a sport where you get a lot of leverage the shorter the slate goes, because with the pitchers facing the batters, I mean, when one does well, the other does poorly. So there's more leverage to be had on a shorter slate, and if you can make those adjustments, then you can get a decent advantage. So where are you looking to get the leverage tonight?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be some things that are going to be tough to find leverage now with, again, another game missing on the slate. And normally I like to talk hitting up front because I do think that tends to be how I build, Alex. But with the pitching on today's slate, it does seem more worth digging into that up top because one decision people have to make right away, I guess really two, with two chalk pitchers who are jumping above the fray. One of whom looks like pretty bad chalk. The other one I think you may be, or maybe not bad, but a risky chalk because we just don't know how much Tyler Glasnow is going to throw. He's going to be projected for pretty high ownership industry wide. But Josh James, a different equation on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, but both sites should have some ownership. Are you buying into the Josh James hype today? The guys talked about him a little bit. Last year had a 37% K rate, and the minors had some really strong numbers as well. He was throwing shorter stints, just average 1.6 innings pitched per game in the majors last year. And obviously, a little bit shorter leash in terms of throwing more innings with his strikeout rate. That number should come down a bit from the 37% just because of him seeing more batters, having to spread his stuff out a little better. But is James worth it to you, Alex, as a chalk play, or is he one of those spots you might consider to try to get leverage?
So I'm much more interested in going for the chalky pitchers because pitching is much more consistent. Basically, like if I have Josh James projected for 18 fantasy points, I expect about 50% of the time he's going to fall over that and 50% under that. So I think that 50% over 18 points, that's probably enough to get it done with that part of the time. So I'm pretty happy just kind of being all about Josh James tonight. I will mention we got some more weather news here. We got the delay in the Cincinnati game.
Okay.
Now, that one, I'm not really worried about a postponement. I'll mention it just looks like it's going to rain a little bit and peter out. So you never really know, but I'm not freaking out about that news.
Anything else weather-wise jump out to you as being worth a concern? I see there, we do have the postponement risk, of course, with the Awesemo projections, which once again, you can get at awesemo.com/join. Use the promo code RESTART to get half off your first month of an all-sport package of Awesemo Plus. The postponement risk so far, it seems like there aren't any crazy ones, and you talked about that game. Any others that you see changing over the course of this next hour? I know you do dabble in amateur meteorology, so anything else jumping out as being a risk?
I mean, I saw Pittsburgh, like maybe there's a tiny weather risk there, but honestly, like when I looked at the radar, I barely saw anything. So I'm not really worried about that.
And shout out to the live chat as well. We appreciate all you guys. Some of our regulars I'm seeing pop up. Greg S.J., Thomas Tyner. We appreciate all you guys in there. Make sure you're hitting the like button. If you're in the YouTube chat right now, whatever you're watching it, just hit us with that like. It always helps us out a bunch to get seen by some new people. And clearly, based on today's MLB slate, the world needs to be informed of intelligent DFS options out there as the world changes before us. So make sure to hit that like button. It helps us out a bunch. Let's go through some of the rest of the pitching. And I've hinted at Tyler Glasnow, and I presume you're going to have a similar take. Josh James, I saw you tweeted about it. He is a guy who's a little more stretched out, pitched, I think, 85 pitches in his last little warm-up game or exhibition throwing session. And Tyler Glasnow seems to be the opposite case. The deeper dive guys talked about it a little bit. Tampa-based pitchers, for whatever reason, just going in like an old school NBA lockout where the guys are not in shape. They're not ready to go. They're warming up and getting themselves fine-tuned as they go. But Glasnow, it seems like the expectation for him is he doesn't know how much he's going to be able to throw. They don't seem to know, at least it hasn't been indicated publicly. So Glasnow is a chalk play. Alex, he looks great. I mean, in terms of strikeout rate, but if he's going to throw 3 innings, you are probably screwed. Or maybe you're not on this slate, I guess, would be the question, Alex. 60% plus ownership. Would you want Tyler Glasnow, or are you just running away?
I think Tyler Glasnow, I mean, I think that he's a good play today, but he is probably going to not be going as deep as you'd like. But his price tag is really good for the kind of pitcher he is, where he got over 30% strikeouts last year. He has, he has a price tag of 8,900. If he was full go, he'd probably be 10K plus. So you get a little bit of a discount. He probably will throw about 4 to 5 innings. Obviously, you're hoping for that 5 because you get the extra 4 points potentially. So I think I'll have a good amount of Glasnow. I mean, he's no Josh James, don't get me wrong, but what's your play now that we know that maybe he's not going to go full 100 pitches?
I mean, I really liked Glasnow this morning when I assumed, much like you normally do, that these guys are fully stretched out and ready to go. Atlanta's a good team, but there are 4 guys above league average in strikeouts in that lineup, along with William Contreras, who we'll see how it goes with him. But I think the expectation is he's not necessarily a great player, despite some good numbers to start the year. So yeah, I would have been on Glasnow. For me, I think I'm going to have him in one out of the lineups I have today, but I really don't see the reason to go above that because I just don't think I have concerns he's not going to go that deep. And there's always a risk against Atlanta. They have pretty dangerous power across the board. Acuna, Albies, Freeman, that top of the order there. And Ozuna has also been hitting the ball really well to start the year. I think there would be enough reason to consider going away from him if we knew he was going to get a normal run of innings, despite him being a good pitcher. And yeah, I think for me, I'd rather get away from him a little bit more. I think where I'm tending to go, and we kind of talked about this the other day on a show that Alex and I did Friday, Nathan Eovaldi came through as being a guy who didn't get much in the way of strikeouts, but just hung in that game long enough to get where he needed to be from a fantasy perspective. He wasn't Shane Bieber on that day, but I think a guy who jumps out to me is maybe being in that range and being capable of just hanging in the game long enough, though he was a bit shorter armed in terms of his innings pitched last year. Hauser, I think, just seems like he's not a risky play necessarily going against Pittsburgh. Not going to find a lot of strikeouts. Pittsburgh, a team who last year struck out at just 19% of the time. This year, this current lineup they have, I have them as having an 18% strikeout rate against a righty. So he's not going to get a lot there. But if he hangs in there and doesn't give up any dangerous damage, I feel like Hauser's the guy I'm going to have a little bit more of than I may have had otherwise. And this guy I also think is terrible, but Mariners fans on Twitter, I do all the research I can. Kendall Graveman, apparently Mariners fans really like, and he's throwing the 98 in the training camps they've had so far, and they seem to think he's due, for a little bit of an upswing. I know the numbers I have for him. Gave up a ton of dangerous power last year, over 200 ISO to lefties, a 271 ISO to righties in a limited sample size. So I'm terrified of going there, but I will have a little bit of exposure just in the hopes that he's cheap enough and opens some things up. So, Alex, these guys for you, these Hauser, Graveman, 2 guys I'm sure starting the day that you wouldn't have wanted to have any of. Do you see having either of these guys at all in your lineups?
So I think Hauser is a guy that has always been frustrating in DFS because he has killer stats as a reliever, but then whenever he becomes a starter, it never seems to have come through. But the main thing I'm worried about with him is just his ability to go deep in the game. He's basically like a Glasnow that doesn't get as many strikeouts, and he's about the same price. So you really are giving up a lot if you go to Hauser. With Graveman, I'm just not excited about the strikeouts because, he doesn't. I didn't know about this report about him having that flamethrower this year, but that could change some things. But the main factor here for me is that Houston is one of the worst strikeout matchups with their lineup today. I have them about 25% worse for getting Ks. And of course, Ks are the name of the game in fantasy baseball. So I really like Glasnow and Josh James. And I think I might just sack them both, even though that's kind of the chalky bill to try to differentiate my lineup elsewhere, just because the other pitchers are so weak. And 3 of the games have openers to boot where you can't really play the opener or the reliever. So just not a lot to choose from today. So I don't hate going off the board of one of those guys, but I just think there might be a better way to build your lineup tonight.
I guess to tap into that, Alex, as you mentioned, some of these projected long relievers and Fulmer coming off of, I think, a Tommy John injury where he has decent numbers, but a guy who's probably not going to be able to throw very long. They don't really know. They're hoping to build him up as they go. Burrow's a guy who's going to be a projected long reliever. Zach Godley, the deeper dive guys talked about, had a really terrible run really for the last year and change for Godley, but maybe he's an interesting play. Would you have any of these guys at all? Because I know you indicated you're not that interested, but do you see them sneaking their way into lineup? Chad Kuhl, another guy's projected long reliever behind Brault. Any of these guys at all strike even the slightest itch for you, or is it just mostly you're staying away from these uncertain opener / bullpen scenarios?
Man, Brault, I kind of liked him before I knew about Chad Kuhl being this kind of 1-2 punch for Pittsburgh, and now that we know that. I don't hate him because he's 4,300, and if he's rolling, maybe they leave him in and delay bringing Chad Kuhl in the game. So I think he might be my kind of, I think in a points per dollar play, he's not a bad option, even though a lot of the time he's going to get subbed out pretty early. So I don't hate going to Brault, but I don't feel good about it either.
Is there any of these guys that you feel like are actually worth, not just being with the field, but substantially getting over it? Because, we're talking about these guys. It's definitely a slate where besides James and Glass now, if you're comfortable, like Alex mentioned, for the reasons why that he did, is there anybody at all you feel, like you're going to be meaningfully above the ownership percentages on, or is it mostly just spread it out and pray one of these guys just gets you a passable enough day to let a hitting stack go off?
Yeah, I mean, the prices are so bad on these guys. Like Lester at 9.2K, I have him for 12 fantasy points. So if I wanted to go off the board, I would probably just go to SuperDraft, because there you get that multiplier. I actually think that Josh James and Glass now probably have pretty high multipliers, if I remember right. But
yeah, Josh James, the 2x multiplier on SuperDraft. So actually might be the best site he's playable on today, though FanDuel, at the discounted price, they're probably pretty close.
Yeah, so even on SuperDraft, you definitely want Josh James. Now, the one situation where I think I might not have these guys is if one thing you can do is you stack against them, because then you get all that leverage. And I think that there are a good amount of possibilities where they just get blown up, and then you get a ton of leverage over the field because they're all going to be Josh James and Glass now.
So one other higher priced guy that I feel like we should hit on fast. And, at this point, we might as well just talk about all the pitchers, even though usually the deeper dive is where you want to go if you want to hear every single player on a slate discussed and broken down very intelligently by Loughran and Adam. We try to hit mostly the main points here, but on this slate, might as well touch everyone. Mike Fultonevich, another guy who last year showed some strides, but prone to blow-ups in the past, seemingly at the times whenever you want them to happen the least. So it was never a good time for a pitcher to get blown up. Today, he's over 10K on DraftKings. Not a particularly great multiplier on SuperDraft, if I'm remembering correctly either. Yeah, nothing too noteworthy there. 1.75x, I guess, which just pairs in comparison to some of the other guys we talked about. I don't see myself having any Fulty by the end of the night. I just think that Tampa Bay lineup, I never really want to go against Tampa Bay. Same reasons you mentioned, or similar reasons to Houston, just don't strike out a bunch. To me, a competent hitting team that I would think has gotten even better with the Japanese player whose name I'm not going to even try to say out loud. Yoshi, let's just call him Yoshi. And be disparaging towards him by referencing him being a video game dinosaur. But a good team.
I think it is actually his nickname, though.
Okay, good. So I feel less bad then about calling him Yoshi. But Yoshi, good power hitter. The deeper dive guys talked about some of his home run track record, limited sample size, hitting with a lot of power so far when he has made contact here. If you had to choose one of the sides, Alex, if you had to go to Fulty or if you had to go to this Tampa Bay Rays stack, and we'll talk more about stacks as we get closer to lock here, Fulty or the Rays stack, which side jumps off as more appealing to you?
Well, I think that I kind of like the idea of Fulty, but when I do the numbers, he looks horrible. So, I guess what I'm thinking here, Tampa Bay, that's inside, so that's a benefit to pitching. One of the reasons why I like Glass now too. Fultonevich, he absolutely crushed 2 years ago. He had 27% K rate. He had a 3.7 xFIP. Last year, his xFIP went down a whole run, the 4.7. His K rate went down to 21%. Now, I'm kind of relying on the betting markets here too, because they obviously are incorporating all the information from spring training and that stuff. And they have him at about 4 strikeouts, which is not very inspiring for 10K. So, man. It's like I wish some of these guys were a little bit cheaper so we'd actually have a choice. But I think it's pretty tough to fade the chalk today as far as pitching.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I guess to close the loop, since we've talked about everybody else, Wade Miley, John Lester, in a rain delay, though, as Alex mentioned earlier, he does expect that game to go off without an issue. Wade Miley is actually a guy I got in one lineup today just because I think he is one of those players who people tend to sleep on, but doesn't give up a lot of dangerous power for the most part, under a 135 ISO to both sides of the plate. And, the Cubs for starting with a gear well, but I do think their lefty hitters are really the ones I worry about the most. Schwarber, a ton of pop. Rizzo as well. Bryant's great, but I think that those guys are ones I worry about, particularly when I'm, pitching against the Cubs. And Miley, to me, I think he's just mediocre enough to survive this particular slate at his price point, and he'll be about 10% owned, though that should come up a little bit with some of the guys being ruled out. He and Savale were two guys I had a little bit more of. I'm just going to end up with Miley, obviously, because Savale no longer pitching today. But Miley, is he a guy who would enter a lineup for you at all? Or John Lester? We did see a Cubs pitcher have a shockingly good day recently. Maybe some pitching mechanics going on over there. I don't know, but I'll give you a chance to throw your hat in for either of these guys.
Yeah, I think Miley, I don't hate him. He's not going to blow you away with strikeout numbers. And ever since the ball being juiced, it's pretty hard to get points by just getting a lot of outs. And the Cubs, about average strikeout matchup, but we know they have a really strong lineup, although it looks a little bit weaker this year. So I think Miley, he definitely has upside because he's stretched out and the other guys might not be. But as far as impressing you with the overall projection, man, I just am stuck on the idea of just having Glasnow and Josh James. I think that's by far the best strategy. And if our ownership numbers are accurate with them at 70 to 60% about, I'm willing to take those odds.
It could be more some of these pitchers we're talking about, and Alex has made clear his stand today with Glasnow and James being above the rest. But talking about all the pitching is something we try to do when some of these slates look particularly ugly, and sometimes it's more of a thought exercise than it is an actual actionable item. But wanted to make sure we touched about most of these guys. Now we're getting questions about Mike Montgomery, so now we're digging extra deep. But Alex, for the sake of completion of this whole thing, Montgomery going against Detroit, shockingly high run total for Detroit, 5.4 implied runs the last that I checked. But Mike Montgomery, does he enter the equation for you at all, even a little bit?
I guess maybe a little bit, about the same as Miley, where one of the advantages of Montgomery is that he's going up against a stack that's way underpriced in the Tigers. The Tigers have been performing pretty well compared to, what you'd expect with a 2-1 start to the season. It was the first time I looked at the standings and they were in the positive since I can remember. So I think Montgomery's fine, but I can't give a full-throated endorsement of him.
Yeah, hard to fully back a guy with a 17% K rate over the last couple seasons, but he is a player who does tend to keep the ball down, just a 26% fly ball rate. So maybe he survives a matchup against the not so feared Detroit Tigers. And just trying to, for the sake of completion, talking about all these guys. So there you go. That is your pitching slate today. So hit that like button, guys. I think now is about the time we should do dong picks, though. I need to point out that yesterday I was a little upset at EMAC for not even prompting dong picks. He was so flustered he didn't do it. And I was going to chime in. I was up bright and early on the West Coast about to go Nelson Cruz. And you know what, Alex? What Nelson Cruz did yesterday? 2 home runs and went nuts and looked fantastic. The best old man in baseball. So shame on you, EMAC. I know you're watching. But we are going to do dong picks. And Alex, the floor is yours on this weird slate. If you have a dong pick, who would it be on to hit a home run today?
Well, I'm going to be a full homer here and go with the Tigers. So I'm going to go with Miguel Cabrera. He's hit 1 homer so far this year, but his ISO is 273. I mean, 3-game sample, so don't bank on it. But last year's ISO is 116, so at least there's some reason to believe that maybe he's found his mojo.
All right, so that's reflected on the board. Miguel Cabrera for the boss. And for me, I'm going to go, for as much as it pains me to go against the Seattle Mariners fan base, one near and dear to my heart, I'm sure. I'm going to go against Kendall Braveman with one of the Astros. And I think that Astro is going to be, oh man, this is tough. I think I'm going to go Michael Brantley. I like the price of him. I'm playing him a stupid amount. He may end up being chalky, but I don't get why Michael Brantley is at the price he is against a guy like Braveman. So that's That's my guy, Michael Brantley for me. And if anybody else, any of our other Live Before Lock hosts give you picks, I will give you guys that update. So tag me in those. And much love to you, Emac, of course, despite you depriving me a little ride with Nelson Cruz yesterday. Let's keep going through here and let's talk about some of the hitting, Alex, because we talked about it earlier. The Mets looking like the relative top stack of the day. Their ownership not quite as high as their top stack percentage. And in fact, it seems like that's still the case. So I'm just going to plug this update in here to be sure. Of course, you get the full top stacks tool with that Awesemo Plus membership at awesemo.com/join. So make sure to get in there and get the top stack tool every day. If you're crammed for time on a slate in particular, it could be a really big asset to use the top stacks tool so you can find out right away which guys you should have a little more than the field on to try to get some leverage. And this Mets team, Alex, still holding up as the top stack team overall. And also the differential between their ownership and their potential to be a top stack, not quite as high as it was before, but still amongst the highest on the slate. So are you with them going against an opener in Josh Osich and being followed by another mediocre pitcher in Zach Godley?
You gotta love the numbers here because, I mean, it's in Fenway. You got an over on under of 11.5. I had honestly, let me check my FanDuel lineups because I already made those. I can kind of see who I'm on. Like my inclination is, I mean, they're the top stack, so top run total. I do have a decent amount of them, it looks like, so I can't really hate on that. But it is a lot easier on FanDuel to play the Mets tonight because at least you have two options for pitcher, and that's going to make your lineups half as chalky. But on DraftKings, once you start building a lineup that is Josh James, Glasnow, then taking like a chalk stack in addition, it's just like you're going to have the same lineup as everyone else. So my strategy tonight is definitely picking the contrarian stacks. So how are you handling the stacks tonight?
So I unfortunately was getting a little too much Wilson Ramos, and it does seem like in terms of the catcher plays on the day, he's going to be one of the highest owned guys. I don't love the Mets. Like I feel like Josh Osich isn't the best, certainly by any stretch. He did give up some power in a limited sample size over the last few years, but he does mostly, or at least, I think he's shown enough competency, and I just don't buy the Mets as being this 5K plus stack. Like I get the Red Sox bullpen isn't great, and they certainly didn't make any particularly meaningful additions in the offseason, but I just don't get the Mets having a 6-point implied total, against even a bullpen day. Like Zach Godley wasn't great, but I just don't. I'm not there. I'm not there quite as much as the field's going to be. And I agree with you. I did get a little bit different. I did try to get some Nimmo in there who's going to be very low owned because he's hitting in the 9 hole, so justifiably so. But a guy who's had some pop historically. I'm kind of willing to get away from guys like Peter Alonso and Wilson Ramos if I'm stacking the Mets, just because those guys are going to be so much higher owned than everybody else there. I'm not there fully. One team I am there fully, though, as we talked about, is Houston. I just really think that this is a spot for them to go off. Houston has been a team I'm probably stacking too much so far in the early season, but the results have been there for the most part. Bottom of the order doing a little better than some of the stars so far. But I think there's enough ways to stack Houston to get pretty good projections across the board without a ton of ownership, especially if you're going to the Gurriel Correa tier of guys. So that's where I'm at the most today, Alex, with Houston. And do you think that Houston's a worthwhile pivot to the Mets today, or would you prefer the Mets?
Yeah, I think that is it's a good pivot. About 2/3 or less. Sorry, about half the ownership. So that's pretty good. About 2/3 of the odds. So that's definitely a trade-off. I think that could be worth making. I'm actually looking a lot further down the board, though. I'm seeing that basically no one is playing Tampa Bay and Atlanta. I have them for 4% chance of being the top stack on a 6-game slate. That would be about a third of the average, but based on the fact that no one's on them, I'm willing to take some shots on that. You do have to go down pretty deep to find stacks that are going to be lower on than their chances of success tonight. So since I'm going chalky a pitcher, I'm going to be trying to take some chances on some of the stacks that might not jump off as far as optimal projection, but have decent chances tonight.
I also got a couple of home run picks here from last year's. Actually, I think we might have had a tie last year. I'm forgetting. But Emac has his pick in, so I'll give him the credit for Ji-Man Choi, who is leading off for the Rays. And Jake, going back, our boy Jake Hari, who I'll be reunited with on tomorrow's Live Before Lock stream, me and the Baseball Savant running it back. Eugenio Suarez, Jake's guy for the home run picks on the day. So there are your dong picks. I got Michael Bradley. Jake's got Eugenio Suarez, Emac G-Man Choi, and Alex going to Miggy Cabrera. So those are your picks there for home runs. One team, Alex, I do want to ask you about. I know you're talking about digging deeper, and this team was one that I got a good amount of running your projections. The Kansas City Royals, a team that I would say normally I'm not dying to stack. I assume that goes with most of the popular world out there, people who have the internet connections at least. And, great values across the board. But, Fulmer as an opener, I do think Fulmer is a guy that I didn't mind too much as a pitcher when he was healthy. We'll see how the Tommy John works out for him, but guy who had a pretty decent strikeout ability, or at least around league average, did limit damage pretty well for the most part. Kansas City, not exactly a murderer's row of hitters either, but they are really cheap and they're going to be very chalky, Alex. So would you follow the chalk with Kansas City to get that value, or is there now just enough value out there you don't even need to consider them?
My favorite play in MLB DFS is fading the top value stack. And as you mentioned, you're going to get them a lot making lineups on Fantasy Cruncher with my projections. And that can be a sign that they're going to be popular tonight. Because obviously a lot of us are looking at the same stats to arrive at these conclusions. So that is definitely where you want to use the top stacks tool to be a part of your process, because I have them about 13% chance of being, or 13% of all the ownership and a 9% chance of being the top stack. So that would definitely be a fade for me. Boston is another team that looks really good, but is just going to be too high owned. Pretty much the first team to come up when I did crunches on DraftKings. So that would definitely lead me to more Mets, more Cubs, and some of the other contrarian stacks too.
Yeah. And that is a worthwhile point to really key in on. Alex mentioned it the other day, and hopefully you'll mention it every stream, because I feel like some days we just need the reality check / reminder. But those value stacks in baseball, sometimes they go off, but value plus chalk in baseball tends to be a dangerous situation. I remember a couple times last year where we all followed the Miami Marlins a couple days. And now it'd be an extra bad move because you're probably leaving with an underperforming stack and also some pandemic virus. But generally the value stacks, if they fail, they fail in a big way, in a way that could also cost you, even if your high price parts of that lineup that you get because of that, even if they go off, you might get killed by a team like the Royals tonight.
Yeah, let me just throw in an additional point here, is that in baseball, just getting the average performance from your team is not nearly enough. You need to basically you need an outlier performance, regardless of whether you stack the best team or the worst team. So, obviously I go a little bit deeper in calculating all these odds at the top stacks, but if a team that isn't very good is going to be really high owned, common sense dictates that just surrounding those players with better options at the rest of your lineup isn't going to really get it done in a GPP.
Yep, and definitely some helpful things to keep in mind here, especially for the new people out there diving into MLB for the first time. And of course, if you do have that premium membership to Awesemo Plus, take advantage of it. Use the top stacks tool, use the top pitchers tool. Of course, the projections and the ownership projections are going to be just as crucial. But those two tools, I really, the deeper dive guys talk about it a lot, where they at one point didn't even realize you put it out there. But Jake and Josh and I had talked about it on Live Before Lock a bunch, and we fell in love with it. So it's really it's a little bit of spreading the gospel, but the top stacks tool, really something that's going to help change your life in terms of MLB DFS, maybe not in terms of your life in general.
If you win using it, that could be a life changer.
Maybe it'll give you perspective at home too, because you'll get that extra free half hour a day to appreciate your family more, because you don't have to worry about measuring the stacks relative to their ownership. The top stacks tool does it for you at awesemo.com/join. Use that promo code RESTART. Of course, that's the one to get half off all the sport packages. Is there an anti-optimizer play for you, Alex? I feel like that's been one of your things that you've really been able to signal out in the past with some of these teams that just don't pop up in an optimizer. Even if you set the randomness at a really high level, you don't get them in a meaningful way that would be appreciated. And, the ownership moving around with a couple of the postponements so far, does anybody look to you like that? I feel like Tampa Bay is one that you mentioned earlier, and I feel like that's the only one I'm seeing that I feel like fits that criteria. But any others for you, Alex?
I'll throw in the Mets, just because I see as far as my top value, they are pretty low. That is mitigated to some extent by the pitchers being pretty cheap today. But that would be one team where if you just optimize based on fantasy points, you're going to end up with too little. Another team, this one is a super sleeper, is the Braves. Now, they are a really talented team. They also are going up against one of the chalk pitchers in Glass now. So that's kind of a double whammy. And on a two-pitcher site where Glass now is going to be the second most popular pitcher, that means you can get a good risk reward by stacking the Braves.
Okay, yeah, interesting call there. And yeah, certainly with, the bullpen for Tampa Bay is a tough one, but sometimes on this short slate, it's just a matter of having some exposure to a team that people are overlooking. And plus, the Braves, nobody going to be owned on there.
Well, one thing about bullpens is they pull out different guys based on the game flow. So if they're just down a ton, they're not going to bring out their best arms. So that's so hard to predict how the bullpen's going to go.
That's a fair point. Yeah, bullpen stats, something I do keep tabs on after feeling I was flying a little blind with them, but that's something I should keep in mind a little bit more, because the Tampa Bay bullpen does jump out as being great, but it certainly can be a different change there depending on how that game starts off. Guys, make sure to get your questions in as well. I'm checking the premium Slack as well as the YouTube chat now. I did say might as well touch everyone. I stand by that, the Maharishi. I did say that. Nariki asking Seattle for all the money. So here's the question. We talked about leverage. The most leverage you can get on today's slate would be going with Seattle, going against Josh James, a guy who is going into a larger role here. He has pitched starting stints in the minors, but for the most part in the majors was getting a lot of relief duty, not getting the full run of things, or opener duty in some cases. Would you see a Seattle stack, Alex, being one that goes off? Because they have kind of stuck it to Houston so far this year. And they do have guys with power. Kyle Lewis was pretty good last year. I wouldn't mind seeing Vogelbach in the lineup, though he's not in it. I think there are some guys you can go to if you wanted to get there. So do you see that being a viable option going to Seattle, Alex? I
definitely think Seattle's viable. Obviously, they're the worst team as far as run total today. But for 4.1, that's really not that bad. The worst teams are putting up way more runs in this era than they were a couple years ago. So this one's all about the leverage. So in my lineups on DraftKings, I have 95% Josh James. But in some of those lineups where I don't have Josh James, I do have Seattle. And same with Glass now and Atlanta. Because it's one of the big ways that you went on tonight's slate is one of these chalk plays just disappoints completely. Now, James has a walk rate of 5 per 9 innings, so that's an easy way to anticipate how this night could go south for him. Is you just get all those extra RBIs and runs based on just walks. So it's a situation where it's maybe if you're not having James in your lineup, then it makes sense to stack against him.
Yeah, and it definitely, I could definitely see a mini stack being viable here. He did struggle some with lefties last year, gave up a 4.6% home run rate, or to lefties, a little 191 ISO to lefties as well. They do have some lefties in that lineup. Shed Long not doing much, not really a power guy, but Crawford, there's some ways to get there. Kyle Seager, of course, has had a pretty good home run track record over the years. So some ways to go there. It's not a move I made, but that is one, on this slate with pitching being so crappy, I didn't want to poke too many holes in Josh James and just kind of wanted to ride with it. But we've seen it happen time and again, a chalk play who maybe doesn't have the longest track record in the world who gets blown up. And that is a feature, not a bug of MLB DFS for sure.
That's a good way to put it.
So we talked about pretty much every pitcher possible. One guy, Alex, that we didn't talk about that somebody pointed out in chat, Michael Wacha, not a good pitcher, would be safe to say. Not terrible versus lefties, definitely not good versus righties, gives up some dangerous power there, going against a loaded Red Sox lineup who has guys who can do damage from both sides of the plate. But he is 0.1% owned, and he is at a weird price point. So, Alex, Michael Wacha, do you see him being useful at all if you're doing 150?
No, because the news reporting says he's the opener. So if I was going to go to a guy, did I have that right? Let me check.
I think he's full. At least as far as I know, I think he's
sorry.
Relative to Michael Wacha, he's as good as he's going to get.
I had that mixed up. So I do think Wacha, you could probably make a decent lineup with him, but I didn't end up making any just because getting leverage against a chalk stack isn't as valuable as getting leverage against a chalk pitcher just because the ownership is so much higher on pitchers.
Got it. Good to know. We got lots of helpful tidbits today from Alex. So hit that like button, guys, as we get to the home stretch here. 3 minutes left until DraftKings lock. Don't forget, it is an early lock time for DraftKings in addition to the early one for FanDuel that we already saw. So make sure you're starting to get those lineups in. And real fast, SuperDraft, I know we didn't touch on a ton here. Of course, the presenting sponsor of the show. And in the chaotic days, we tend to have a little bit less time to bathe in SuperDraft the right way. But Alex, is there anything on SuperDraft that you feel like is worthwhile? I know we talked about Josh James, great multiplier on him, possibly the site that he's the best play on because just 2x multiplier is hard to find, and he's legitimately a monster with strikeouts. But anything else for you, Alex, on SuperDraft? Makes sense on a lot of tournaments with overlay on there. So I feel like if people want to sneak in real fast, might be a good time.
Yeah, I think that Josh James being 2x multiplier, I like stacking against him even more on SuperDraft than on DraftKings. Because you are getting a way higher multiplier for the Seattle Bats. So that makes all these really bad teams way better because the variance of bats is pretty similar regardless of how many runs they're projected to score. So when you're getting that multiplier on top of it, it's going to make the higher multiplier plays much higher variance, which works in your favor, and it kind of is fun because you can pick the long shots and get rewarded more on SuperDraft.
Yeah, there's 5-man stacks you can make with Seattle on SuperDraft that do have the 2x multiplier too. So wouldn't be the worst idea if you could sneak in real fast, get over to superdraft.io or download SuperDraft and play a Josh James lineup and play one stacking against Josh James and hope that you come out ahead at the end of the night there. Last minute here to lock. I guess one question we didn't hit on for our boy McCod in the premium Slack. Actually, one more important one for Pedrito PR. Thoughts stacking the Brewers on FanDuel. They have not started the year well at all. FanDuel, maybe somebody doing some swapsies there, but the Brewers going against Braults and Cool. Does that strike you as interesting at all on FanDuel, Alex?
Definitely, yeah. I think that's a great stack on FanDuel. They have a team total almost 6, so that's incredibly inspiring. I mean, Milwaukee is a team that has a ton of power. You don't love that it's going to be a bullpen game because then you don't get the advantageous platoon splits necessarily, but they're definitely a great play. Did you end up with Brewers?
No, I got one off Yelich just because I feel like when there's money to spend, I never mind getting Yelich in there, especially if he's going to be, potentially high single digits or a little bit higher than that owned. But yeah, I didn't get there as much as, the Brewers, I feel like I tend to get more at home generally. Going against Pittsburgh, I made my choice. Didn't get there much. Does feel like a blind spot. I was so thrown by Cleveland being out where I had my Cleveland exposure set up so nicely. And then I've had to walk it back shamefully since. So that's the way it goes in MLB DFS. Let's see. People asking, Dope Heathen asking, am I doing the 4 corners videos this year? Doesn't look like that'll be happening, at least right now with our schedule, but something I'm trying to keep an eye toward because, frankly, the NBA and MLB schedules this year are very different and make it tough to produce the video the way that I want to do it on the West Coast. But we'll see, and I appreciate the support. Alex, anything you want to hit on here before we call it quits? Early day for us to go bathe in MLB, perhaps blowing up like the Rudy Gobert situation before our eyes.
Well, I think that, first thing I'll mention is obviously with that postponed game, make sure you go through all your lineups to make sure you don't have any players from that game. I noticed on FanDuel when I load up my player replace, it's not highlighting those players in any way. So I'm just searching CWS and CLE to find them because obviously the lock happened 10 minutes after it was postponed, so I didn't have time to change it. And I'm sure people watching are in the same boat here. Other than that, it's going to be an interesting slate with these two super chalk pitchers. So that'll definitely be fun to sweat, and hopefully we get a big winner that's watching the show right now.
Yeah, hopefully we're rooting for you guys out there. And again, weather the storms here, both literally and figuratively with MLB, because it does make it worthwhile. And nights like tonight, as Alex mentioned, should be a lot of dead money out there floating around. Let's make sure to get the plugs in. Oh, Tyler Glasnow, Alex, already got a strikeout, so maybe he'll pay off.
That's great because I have 70% and the field has 60.
So boom, that 10% is really where you're going to make your difference today.
Yeah, that's the thing about these chalk pitchers is when they do well, you can't exactly celebrate.
Yeah, so hopefully Tyler Glass now hangs in for Alex's sake and for all of you out there who played him. Hit that like button before you go. Make sure to take advantage of the deals we have. They're going away fast. The restart promo code is going away at the end of this week, so take advantage. Get all of our sports, the MLB, PGA, NBA coming back this week. All the stuff that's been fun during quarantine, as well as all the sports that are coming back. You can get all that data at your fingertips at awesemo.com/join if you use the promo code RESTART. So go take advantage of that now at awesemo.com/join. It's half off your first month of the packages. And again, you're getting all the data that you want on there. So take advantage of it and really just use all the tools. Like, play a lot of stuff. It's honestly, Alex talks about it a lot, but playing as many slates as possible, as long as you have good data, it's going to generally be the plus EV move. And that has been how I've tried to do it over quarantine, and it's come through. And also make sure to take advantage of SuperDraft's promo code. Use the promo code Awesemo10, AWESEMO10. If you do that, get $10 with your deposit of $100 at superdraft.io or on the App Store if you download SuperDraft there. If you deposit deposit more than $100, you get $20 free in Super Cash. So go superdraft.io, say hello to Lineup Freedom, and make sure to take advantage of all the overlay and frankly the costs that go into starting up a new site. SuperDraft really does a good job making sure it's worthwhile for new players on there. Let's go to superdraft.io, use the promo code Awesemo10, $10 free on your deposit of $10 or more, and $20 free if you deposit more than $100. SuperDraft, no limits, more winning. We'll be back tomorrow, so subscribe, hit that notification bell. You'll know whenever we have new content coming up, and we keep your fingers crossed that you survive today's slate, as well as all the players in MLB, because it could get bad fast, but we're rooting for you guys, and we'll see you guys again soon. Good luck.